Last December was probably, for me personally, the worst physically and emotionally. I can't support people if I'm not in a good place myself. And I told that to hundreds of people throughout the years. You can't help somebody if you're not in a good place yourself. So I felt like the hypocrite that was really good at giving advice and rubbish at taking it. I wasn't always 6'2". I used to be quite small. I had this terrible haircut. It wasn't even the bowl cut. I don't even think clippers were around at that stage. And I thought there was something wrong with me, so I thought I was a bit broken. I mean, I landed back in their life after being away for 10 years, like this tornado landing in their back bedroom. It takes a lot of work, but I think the hope thing's really important, and especially with ARC, one of the things that we really do provide is, look, we can't not have hope that people can change, because we've no right to write someone off. I'm not just a person in recovery. I'm not somebody who struggles with drug and alcohol addiction. I'm so much more than that.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Sharing Stories podcast. In this podcast, we talk to different guests to try and get a unique perspective and insight into their area of specialism. Today, I'm joined by Gary Rutherford. Gary is an award-winning nurse. He's won the RCN Northern Ireland Nurse of the Year 2022, and he's the founder of ARC Fitness. So, Gary, delighted to have you.
Delighted to be here, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming on. So where should we start? Looking at a wee bit about your background, who you are, and maybe a wee profile on ARC, what ARC's all about.
I'm ready.
Go for it.
So let's take me, first of all, I suppose. So I'm a registered mental health nurse. I qualified in 2015 here in University of Ulster. I then went on to work in the crisis service, working with acute mental health crisis care. Then I worked in the addiction service. So I suppose that's the professional side of things. Now I went into nursing later. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So that's the nursing. I'm also a personal trainer. I'm the founder of a not-for-profit organisation that supports people struggling with substance misuse issues. And I'm a husband, a wife, and a daughter who I love, who's a monkey. He's crazy. And the reason I kind of tell it in almost that order is because I'm also a person in long-term recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. I went back and retrained after I got sober and went through a lot of different processes. And the reason I always kind of use that at the end is because we're very quick to judge people. We're very quick to create an image of a person when we hear the problem. And it's so important they talk about us being a lot more than that. So, like, I struggled for years, Kevin. The first conversation I had about alcohol dependence, I was 17. I didn't get sober until I was 30. I didn't have any trauma growing up. I had a good upbringing. Parents were wonderful. I was just really anxious as a kid. We grew off the back of the troubles, and I think I carried a lot of that anxiety with me. And then I was bullied in school, and that just reinforced a lot of stuff back then because I wasn't always 6'2". I used to be quite small. I had this terrible haircut. It wasn't even the bowl cut. I don't even think clippers were around at that stage. And I thought there was something wrong with me. So I thought I was a bit broken because people are bullying me. So there must be something wrong. And I got taken out of school then here in Derry and went somewhere else in Limavady and changed and became problematic.
Right.
I was bullying people, I was getting in trouble, I was using substances at school, I was doing all that stuff. So a lot of my core relationship building with drugs and alcohol was based out of fear and anxiety. And it's all, we could talk about it all right now, and we'll get into it a wee bit more, but that was the issue that led on to the chaos, that led on to getting myself sorted out, and then that's whenever ARC, the idea, I suppose, for ARC came about. So ARC's we were 4 years last week. 4 years old last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And I didn't think, not that I didn't think I would see it, but I didn't think it would be what it is now. It started off as a Facebook page. Whenever I got sober, I started running. So I was never physically fit. I was like anti-fit. Like I could run away from things that I'd done wrong very easily, but get me in a gym or anything else, and I was having none of it. And I got sober and joined a running club, and the benefits from the physical activity, the self esteem, the self worth, the self confidence, all of that sort of stuff, being around people who were focused on healthier lifestyles, normalised me being a sober person. And I thought there's something in this.
So, Gary, you're the founder of ARC. Tell us a little bit about the organisation and what that stands for.
So ARC stands for Addiction Recovery Coaching. And I suppose like where the name was one of those kind of things where it was like, oh, addiction and recovery and physical coaching. So that's where the ARC came from. And we're a not-for-profit addiction recovery service, and we're based in Derry, Londonderry. So basically what that means is anything that we generate in terms of social enterprise or money goes back into our organisation to expand the services. And so fundamentally what makes us different than other recovery organisations is we use physical activity as the vehicle for treatment. So we engage individuals in a physical activity program, as well as an online education program, as well as professional therapy support and community. So it's based on positive and healthy lifestyle choices. So it's a real health focused model, and it's super beneficial. But we do a lot more than that. So as I mentioned, it's individuals. We do family support. We do a lot of other different things. But that's what makes it unique, and that's what makes it different. The skill set that we have within ARC is phenomenal, between mental health nurses, therapists, counsellors, personal trainers, dynamic running therapists. So we have a lot of really good people. So that's what we do. So we're based in Derry, Londonderry, 4 years, and we're getting bigger.
Was it about your experience when getting sober? Was that something to do with? Were you saying that maybe having an organisation like ARC could have, offered you some more support? Was it something that you just seen was missing?
Definitely, because traditionally we only had limited options. There's a lot of different organisations that help and support people. The fellowships, the anonymous fellowships, have been around for 100 years. They've helped hundreds of thousands of people. They're phenomenal, but we're not all the same. And sometimes we need to find something that works for us, and it's that one size fits all. There doesn't have to be this one size fits all approach. If it works for you, it's great, and if it changes your life, it's great. And for me, it was the physical aspect of things. It was seeing how. Now, I don't. I'm not saying that going out for a run 3 days a week is going to solve all of the issues that you have created in your life. But it's about if it can get you on a foundation that's solid, if your physical health as well, your mental health's that little bit better, then you can start dealing with the other stuff. So it was definitely birthed out of my experience, Kevin, of coming out of treatment. Because I was in residential treatment twice over the years, 2 different types of treatment centres, different experiences in both of them. I've taken something from them all, but we recover in the community.
Yeah.
And there was no organisation that was giving people a community to be in that was safe or that was sober or that was encouraging, supportive and healthy. And I think that's where the gap for ARC came in. So it was a real kind of, everything kind of just landed all. It's like one of those things when your passion meets your purpose and all this sort of stuff. And it just came together.
So all the parts of the jigsaw came together at the right time.
Definitely.
Do you think it's something to do with society, especially on social media? We're seeing, I suppose, more awareness, more education about addiction, about recovery, and how was it for you? Your ARC's open 4 years. How many years before were you?
So I'm sober 11.
So what was it like 11 years ago in terms of speaking about having an addiction and being in recovery?
I was always quite transparent. I almost broadcast it before somebody could find out, like a safety mechanism. I'm like, I'm going to tell you before you find out, and therefore it's all okay. So I was always an advocate for recovery. So I was always like, I'm not going to hide behind this. This is something that happened, and it's not who I am, and I'm dealing with it. I'm managing it. So from a personal perspective, I always, like my social media posts were always geared around, the importance of recovery, celebrating milestones. So that was my own private life. And ARC then just became the extension of that. But I think what we're seeing now off the back of all that is we're seeing people come forward sooner. We're seeing people talking about this thing more. And I think it's really important because I've said this before, anybody can fall into a hole. We have a responsibility to help them up.
Yeah.
It's not about whether you live on this side of the water or that side of the water, or you have this much in your bank, or you're working or you're unemployed. It's irrelevant what your circumstances is. Like, I work with people from all walks of life that have now developed dependency issues and substances, and it's irrelevant who or what you are. It can happen to anybody, and for something that's so stigmatized out there, we've come a long way with mental health. I think in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
The okay to not be okay and all that movement, which was really good. Imagine we could be in the same position with addiction.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work still to do, but I think we're moving in the right. I think we're moving in the right direction.
Like as you're kind of touching on every mental health, I think I have a better understanding of mental health, which is strange, considering people my father and stuff went through a recovery program with yourself and other people within the family and stuff. I have to say that I don't. If I'm being completely honest, maybe don't fully understand what addiction is. Just wee simple things like what's the difference between a really unhealthy habit and addiction. And I think it's such a grey area that I really don't know where I stand with it.
And it's funny that you say that, right? Because one of the biggest factors or catalysts for like discrimination and stigma is lack of information, lack of knowledge. And we've done it for centuries. Things we didn't understand, we pushed away. I don't understand it. I don't want that's not for me. I need to know that. So we have a duty to educate. So like there's addiction, and not everybody who uses substances is addicted to the substance, right? So it's important to remember that. There's people out there that use alcohol to excess, that use drugs to excess, but are still managing the function and hold everything down. That's not necessarily to say that they're addicted. Whenever people become addicted or dependent, they've used something enough that the structural changes within the brain happen. And this is what we don't understand the biology of addiction enough. It actually changes the reward pathway. So it hijacks your reward system. And your body learns that pleasure and reward comes from the thing that gives me that the most. So alcohol floods the brain receptors, drugs flood the brain receptors. If you do that enough, one, your body stops creating it, and two, you now condition yourself to think that that's the only way that I can feel better. And if we start to understand addiction, then we start to treat it differently, because people use drugs or alcohol for like loads of different reasons, right? So I try to categorize it into four things. So we use drugs or alcohol to feel better. So somebody might have a pint of beer and they might feel good. That's totally understandable. The other one is to feel better. Chronic anxiety, if your mood is low, people drink or something to make themselves feel better. Justifiable. It's easy to understand that. Then the other one is to do better. So we see this in the gym environment where people use steroids or people use amphetamines to stay alert or stay awake. And then because the last one is because other people are doing it as well. So your environment. So those are the four main reasons why people are using. Whenever people come to us, it's the exact four same reasons that they have to stop, because what has happened is the tipping point has changed. So what they've used to feel good is not making them feel good anymore. They're not feeling better. Their mental health has deteriorated. They may have lost their job. They're definitely not doing better in life, and they need to get around people then that are supportive, that are encouraging, and that are trying to move them on their journey. So I think we need to look at addiction differently, as opposed to it's not a moral feeling. People who are addicted aren't bad people. There are people that found a way to cope with something in their life, but now this has become problematic for them.
I think that's part of the thing that I'm really interested in, how people think, how the brain works and stuff. And I was reading a book a couple of weeks ago called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Love him.
And I think it was chapter 2 or 3, and they broke down the process of, I think it's cue, craving,
Reward,
response, and reward. And to me, that was the clearest layout of addiction for me. Anyway, they helped me understand it. But the book wasn't talking in reference to addiction; it was talking about habit, and it was really interesting that I took something else from it. And one of the things that I suppose stood out to me there was when people told me, and I seen your campaigns about stigma and stuff. If what's happening with that kind of cue to reward response thing, if that's a process that your brain's going through, and as the brain kind of develops, it starts cutting out stages. So it starts going, I feel low, the reward, I feel whatever. The
Yeah.
response becomes drink, or the response becomes eat, or whatever it might be.
Automatic.
Automatic. And it's
Mhm.
all about how that develops.
Mhm.
And that process, that got me thinking about that. So
Mhm.
if someone was to read that, for me it was very clear why stigma shouldn't exist. Why
Yes.
it's not necessarily the person to blame. It's maybe a broken process. Would that be
So,
fair?
so addiction will hijack that whole process. So
Mm-hmm.
the dopamine reward system
Mm-hmm.
automatically feels stressed, low, something has happened. The automatic response is either I need a substance or a drink or something because I have learned that that's where I need to go to. It's so quickly. People who have triggers and cravings, people who relapse, that can happen so quickly. And that's why, like, this whole relapsing thing as well. So you imagine how long somebody conditions themselves to create those habits and like to ingrain them that they're automatic.
Yeah.
Think how hard that has to be to undo. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why recovery is so hard. And we're really rubbish as a society because we punish people for relapse when we have to undo a lot of years worth of conditioning. So recovery is like behavior change.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, the brain is highly elastic. Okay, so you can change and relearn,
Mm-hmm.
which is really good. So what you have to start trying to do is find ways to get the reward, but from something else in a repeated way. Exercise, for example. Okay, now you're not going to get the same high from going on a 5 mile run than you are from buying a load of drugs. However, you still will, but if you do it on a repeated basis, it becomes your reward, and that's when you start to create your habit. So addiction and recovery is there's loads. So I'm so glad it's refreshing to be talking to somebody who's actually talking about the brain and habits and stuff like that, right? Because there's this real division out there between is addiction a disease or is it not? Because if you say it's a disease, then you relinquish any responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about relinquishing responsibility. Anything that changes the processes or structures within your brain is classed as a disease because the brain is a disease. It's not functioning as it should do. So it is 100% a disease. Doesn't mean you don't take responsibility for doing something about it.
Yeah.
And it's divided everybody for so long. And I think we need to start looking at how this thing happens because lockdown, for example, came along and people were drinking more. So maybe somebody who wasn't physically dependent was now drinking a bottle of wine every single night for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. Whenever it came to a month and they tried to stop, they were getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
So they drank. That's how easily it can happen.
Yeah. I think that was common for a lot of people, myself included, that lockdown, I don't feel I have an unhealthy relationship, but I realised very quickly in
Mm.
lockdown, stuck in the house, that there was, you know, out of boredom, out of,
Yep.
you know, the
Uncertainty,
uncertainty, yeah.
anxiety, 80% of your salary with nothing to do.
Yeah.
And we saw that across the board. So we saw a threefold increase in mental health issues, anxiety disorders, and substance use off the back of COVID. Our waiting list has spiked. And we haven't even seen it come to fruition. Access for alcohol was easy. It was being delivered to your home. You didn't even have to go and buy it. There was the same with drugs. It was being delivered to people's homes. So lockdown has created an issue around that. But again, it goes back to people using for whatever reason. So, if lockdown created a situation that filled you full of anxiety because now your routine's out of whack, you're at home with your kids 24-hour a day and you're not used to that, and you'll find something to medicate, you'll find something to
Yeah.
reward and alleviate.
So do you think now then that with lockdown and everything that went on, do you think you're still seeing the after effect of that? Do you see habits that have started there that still haven't properly, come to the point where they're reaching out for help? Is there,
I'd say there probably is. Okay, so what are we off the back of the lockdown now? Is it 2 years? Give or take.
Yeah.
Give or take to whatever. You might have people that have started the process or who had maybe been in the process prior to the COVID, right? And that stigma of, I know that this is a problem, I'm trying to sort it out, I'm getting a day or two, it's failing, and they're not coming forward for help. But then the crisis will kick in and then they'll come forward for help. And that's the thing. If we make accessing support for drug and alcohol use easier and less stigmatized, then maybe people will come sooner before the crisis happens. It's harder to deal with the crisis,
Yeah. So when again the word stigma just keeps coming up, I think it's good to talk about it because that will kind of again raise awareness. But are all addictions equal? Because I think my opinion could be completely wrong. Is that in certain scenarios should it be drug misuse, alcohol? They seem to come with different connotations and associations in terms of people's character and their morals and ethics and stuff. Is
So I think so. Socially, we have created a hierarchy of addiction, right, and drugs of abuse. So, and I always try to use this wee story. So imagine, Kevin, you came from a wee village. You were in a terrible car accident and you lost your leg, but below the knee. There was no alcohol or bars, but there happened a wee man who sold heroin beside you. And you tried it and you felt good, and it took away the pain. So you started using it, but now you've become dependent on heroin. It happened to be there. But then I live over here in Garyville, and I had the same accident, and I lost the leg. There's no drugs around me, but there was an off license, and I had a drink, and I felt good, and made me feel better. Didn't feel as sore, but I became dependent on alcohol. As a society, who do we stigmatise more? We stigmatise the heroin user because we associate that as a bad thing. They're just two individuals that have found something that was environmentally accessible to them, and they learned to cope with it. The difference with addiction, okay, is it just what the substance is or what the thing is irrelevant. It's the why. What you know. So somebody who's an IV heroin user, for example, will appear more chaotic because it has a lot more destructive behaviors associated with it. You know, the need to use, when you use IV drugs, you need to use more. It's costly. You know, so there comes a lot of the connotations with that. But like if you leave somebody who's using alcohol long enough, a lot of those same behaviors. I remember whenever I was using, I was cheating, I was lying, I was stealing. I was hiding it differently, but I was doing the same things. But yet we'll still judge somebody because alcohol is so accessible. It's cultural. Gambling, for example, is highly destructive. You know, it might take me 13 years to get, liver damage, but I could lose my mortgage, my house, in a heartbeat with gambling. You know, so it's not about it one being worse than the other. The behaviours around them look a little bit different, but unless we find out what's the driver, like what is it and what needs to happen, they move past it, then that's what we need to be looking at. And I feel really kind of torn, especially in society, because with addiction, the thing that shoots addiction in its foot is because a lot of like the first line services, like the PSNI and the ambulance service and A&E, they unfortunately have to deal with the behaviours. Yeah. So they're seeing the negative behaviour, they're seeing the assaults, the aggression, and not seeing the individual within it. It's not their fault. They're not trained to. But if you deal with something long enough that's negative, you start to create this image in your head of what people with addiction are like. And they weren't always that way. And it's hard to visualize that whenever somebody's hurling abuse at you or shouting at you,
But equally, if someone's on there from an addiction to food,
yes,
and is overeating consistently, going on needing attention because of heart disease and obesity and stuff, like, yes, there may be some stigma around that, but nowhere, would I be right in saying nowhere near the same for alcohol and
not at all,
drugs?
Not at all. And again, because it's what we've done as a society, okay, because it has been seen traditionally as a criminal justice issue and a moral feeling, as opposed to it's a health issue. If we look at this from a health perspective, if we can reduce the risks, if we can educate the public, if we can start looking at it differently, then maybe our perceptions will change. Portugal, for example, decided, right, there were loads of issues in Portugal in the past, right? Heroin, IV use, HIV, all that stuff was going on. They decided, you know what's going to happen? One, we're going to legalise some things. Then we're going to provide people with support from a health perspective on addiction and recovery and all that sort of stuff. Massively changed the country because they changed it from criminal justice and punishment to health and support. And that's really important. ARC's a health-based model. So not only is it physical, then there's the healthy lifestyle choices, there's the diet, there's the nutrition, there's access to therapies, So we need to see it as a health issue. But we also need to start prioritising, somebody could eat themselves to death as somebody who could drink themselves to death, as somebody who could overdose accidentally,
So, like, you've done loads to kind of combat stigmas around addiction. You run an annual campaign, isn't it? And then you've taken on some kind of challenges yourself. One of the ones that stood out to me was the 5 marathons, 5 days. And am I correct in saying the £22 vest was to represent carrying shame?
Yep, the weight of shame. Upon reflection now, how smart was that as an idea? So, yes, every year we run really highly visible campaigns for the sole purpose of saying, look, this thing is here. However, we're more than that. Let's look at it differently. Let's actually celebrate people in recovery as opposed to being like, oh, if they mother them. No, I've seen people in recovery do amazing things. So the campaigns are highly invitational. We invite the public to everything that we can. So whether that's health events that we run, where we give people free health checks, get people in, get them talking, get them seeing that a recovery organisation doesn't have to be the thing that's hidden away, out of the way. So we do health events, we have a conference, but yes, the no shame campaign was one that definitely sticks in my memory and my,
Was that the first one?
and my medical records. I thought it would be a good idea to. It was because I got back and they run it. Running was the love that I found from a health point of view. And then I stopped and I thought I need to get back to running. So I thought, right, I've done 5 marathons before over the space of 18 months. So I thought in my head, wouldn't it be a good idea to do 5? And then I was looking through Amazon and it popped up a weighted vest. And I was like, so then I started thinking about it a little bit more, and I thought, sure, I could do the 5 marathons with a weighted vest because it's only 5 days. I'll do them back to back, and then they'll be done. And then the training started for it, and I was like, what have I let myself in for? Because I'd actually put it out there. The weight was originally going to be double the weight, but it took me something like an hour to run 3 miles, and I thought it's just not going to work. But so we did that. We made it extremely public. We cut over the 5 days for the marathons. We made the routes loops so people could jump in. They could run 3 miles with us, 2 miles with us. So we can make people be part of it as well. And I went down from a no shame perspective really well. However, I fractured my fibula on the second day and progressed the last 3 days with a broken leg and went to the hospital after it and put me out of action for a while. But the traction of the No Shame campaign was really important. So was it worth the break? I'll take it. Yep. Would I do it again? Maybe not. Maybe not. But maybe if somebody else wants to, I'll highly support you. But I just saw what it did in Derry, and I saw so many people get behind it. Like we were selling like No Shame t-shirts that whole year, and like they see people walk around Derry wearing not only ARC Fitness t-shirt, which is notoriously known for addiction recovery, but to see the No Shame t-shirts about was just really inspiring. And that's something that we'll do every year. We'll find a different theme for each of the campaigns, and we'll just celebrate people who are trying to get themselves together.
So you ran 3, so just to put this into context, 3 days, 26 plus 26 miles a day, was it?
It's 26.2.
26.2.
0.2, yeah.
On
Those 0.2s are really important.
definitely, but 26.2 miles on a broken leg.
Aye. It was
with, so 22 pounds, just under 2 stone.
What's 22 pound? Aye.
No, hold on, 28 pound by 2 stone, so
Yeah.
about 1.5 stone on your back with a broken leg.
Yeah.
That's commitment, the cause there. So how's these campaigns developed? So that was No Shame. That was the first one.
Yep. So
what came after that?
we had No Shame, and then we had Motion Changes in Motion. And the fundamental thing about Motion Changes in Motion was literally what it says on the tin. If you're actively moving forward in something, it can change how you think and feel. We use exercise as a real simple example. So if I'm doing a workshop, if you're going to take part in a workshop in the future, you now know this. But anyway, I get people to stand up and we run on the spot for 5 seconds. Now, they only find out that just before they're about to do it. So I always tell them there's 2 reasons. One, because I love to see people's faces because they're like, what? And I get them to get up and get them to move about. And then I get them to sit down and says, well, how are you feeling now? Nobody's feeling the same as they were before they did. Their heart beating faster, the blood's pumping through the body, they're breathing faster. And it's the most fundamental thing that we can show that motion can change people's emotion, that people can change. So exercise can help you change. It's the simplest form that we can do. So we went out, we had 2K colour dashes where people were out running and getting clattered in powder and colours, and just really pushing that idea of getting up and getting moving. So whether it's moving forward in exercise or moving forward in general, just keep moving forward. So that was the motion changes in motion one. And then the more recent one is the More Than That campaign, which is fundamentally, I'm not just a person in recovery. I'm not somebody who struggles with drug and alcohol addiction. I'm so much more than that. And it's about celebrating the other good things that we are, whether that's husbands, fathers, we have triathletes, whatever that is. Because it's really important not to lose sight of somebody, because just because you're dealing with a problem, it shouldn't be everything about you. You know, it shouldn't be, because we're all so much more than that. And that's what that campaign is going to be really focusing on.
And that really explains your introduction when you went through all the steps of who you were before even recognising or speaking about the addiction part at the end.
It's so powerful, because I'll stand up in front of an audience, or if I'm delivering a lecture or whatever, and I don't look like what I would describe at the end. You know, like, so if people meet me now at a time in my life where it's really difficult to marry up the thought of how things were before, the chaos of addiction, the criminal justice issues, the engagement with PSNI, treatment centres, hospitalisation, you know, Buckfast, Guildhall Square. Like, people find it really difficult to marry that person with this person. And for me, I'm really proud of that, because it's taken a lot of work. I have so much admiration for people who are trying to get sober and recover, because whenever you don't have anything to fall back on, it forces you to deal with it yourself. And sometimes that's hard and uncomfortable and messy. And that's why I have so much respect for people who are just trying to get through this. But it takes a lot of work. But I think the hope thing's really important, and especially with ARC, one of the things that we really do provide is, look, we can't not have hope that people can change, because we've no right to write someone off. We're very quick to say, oh, they'll never change, or he'll never be any different, but we see it. We see people change. Like, we see it happening. We see people change. We know that it's possible with the right help, the right support, the right environment. Anybody can change. Now, that isn't to say that we don't lose people along the way who don't get access to that. And that's the stark reality of addiction and how things in the drug landscape is changing. We are seeing more drug deaths. We are seeing higher alcohol rates and stuff like that. But maybe we need to look at how do we treat it differently.
Yeah. In terms of treating it, and you've talked about the support you offer to people struggling. What about the support you offer to families? Because bringing them along, you know, some of the family groups that you run, what do you see as the importance of that?
So important. It's one of the most neglected part of this process. And it takes me back to my own parents who, I mean, I landed back in their life after being away for 10 years, like this tornado landing in their back bedroom, and they had no skills. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to turn, and that hadn't really changed much. So we thought, right, we're supporting individuals, and that's really great, and we'll continue to do that. But how can we help and support people who have this in their life, who don't know where to turn, who don't know what to do? So we thought, we'll start the family support group, and we started that, I think it was a year and a half ago. And they're probably one of the most emotional things that we have, because we facilitated. My wife, Sarah, Sarah's a therapist, and she's also lived with me long enough to have a really good insight into recovery. But we have family members that maybe for the first time have sat in a room with other people and thought, you know what, I'm not alone. Other people are going through this, and it's powerful. To the point now where we have a family community there. We have 50 or 60 family members now. And we're changing how we even support the family members now. They have access to the gym. They can come now and train in classes with people who are in recovery. So they're breaking down all the stigma, and the hope and the encouragement is all there. But there was a real deficit. And I think when you ask someone to deal with their problem, that's fine. They have to take responsibility and deal with their problem. But if their biggest supporters are their family, then they need to understand what's going on as well, to give everybody the best possible chance.
Yeah.
So that's something that we will continue to grow and develop and offer for families, because, as I said, my parents didn't know where to turn.
Mm-hmm.
And if I think if ARC had been there for them, then they definitely would have got a lot from it.
Yeah, and they're the first protocol. You know, in many cases, the person's in the house with them. They're
Family members,
dealing with it
yeah.
24 hours of the day, and
They're the caregivers, they're the problem solvers, they're the picker-uppers, they're all of the things. You know, they carry the weight, they sacrifice their own stuff to protect the, you know, a lot of different things. So, and it's funny, the family support group isn't about, so this is what you need to do to go and fix Jimmy over there. It's about how can you be okay,
yeah,
whether Jimmy's okay or not.
mm-hmm.
How can you be all right? So it's about supporting them, and that's what's really important. But that's something we'll continue to keep pushing forward. But there's definitely a real need for the family aspect as well.
One of the questions I wanted to ask about was about the effect that it has on the people given the care. So this relates to you as well. But being the head of this organisation and being in groups with people who are suffering so badly and constantly, now there's loads of positives you're around. Clearly there's good news stories and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take the job home with you at times? How do you emotionally, because how do you switch off from that and kind of cope with?
I always think I should have like the perfect response to this question, right? But I don't, because I'm not good at it. Like, and I'm being totally honest. I struggle to differentiate between the work that I do and life, right? So whenever I set ARC up, it was because the desire was to help and support people. So the desire is always to help people. But also working on addiction is not straightforward. It's not black and white. It's complex. It's complicated. It can be full of crisis. It can be full of joy, laughter, tears. Some people get it. Some people don't, you know. And I've learned a lot of lessons over the last 4 years. Last December was probably, for me personally, the worst physically and emotionally I was. We were coming up to December. Our funding was about to run out in February. I didn't know if I had a job. Mags, who works with us, didn't know that she have a job. And it was a really stressful time. I was trying to navigate home life, and Zoe, my daughter, got unwell last year. She was diagnosed with a rare form of epilepsy, which now requires a lot of treatment and focus. And it just made me just look at things and think, right, I can't support people if I'm not in a good place myself. And I told that to hundreds of people throughout the years. You can't help somebody if you're not in a good place yourself. So I felt like the hypocrite that was really good at giving advice and rubbish at taking it, until such times as I realised, you know what, I have now created a team of people who are phenomenal at what they do, who care for people, who want the best for people. I now have to trust that 4 years worth of being engaged with ARC, seeing how it works. I have to trust them to be able to then go and take that on.
Yeah.
And allow me to spread that weight across the organisation as opposed to just me, and balance it out a bit better. Because I think one thing I learned about this, whenever ARC started, I kind of became the advocate for recovery. And if you're going to start leading people in a movement like that, you actually need to be able to be okay. You need to be able to say that I don't always get it right, but always strive to be okay. Like, and if that means that I have to take a break to look after myself and look after my family, I have to. And I have to get better at doing it. I have such a supportive wife. So I was lucky enough to meet Sarah by accident, actually, at a course at the Tech. I had just come out of treatment, and Sarah, she's a therapist, so she was doing personal development. So it was the substance misuse course at the Tech. And I met Sarah, and it started. We became friends and stuff. But I think she unofficially CBT'd me for 11 years at home. So she had, trying to challenge all that distorted thinking and negative thinking and stuff. But Sarah's been a phenomenal support, and she sees this toll that it does take too. So she does. So we try our best, because Sarah's a therapist in ARC, so. It's at home too, but working with people with addiction, I think a lot of people go into it either because they've been affected by it, they have a real passion for it, or maybe they have lived experience. But it doesn't make it any less hard
Mm-hmm.
because it's people's lives. Like
Yeah,
you
you still
know,
have to cope with your addiction, and like, I suppose when you feel low and down, is
uh,
that when you
peop
struggle with that
people forget, right,
more?
that I am still a person in recovery. I'm not walking about saying here, "Arca's the cure," and you'll never worry again. Like it's funny, and very few people ask me about that, and it's really refreshing when people do, because I also have to look after myself.
Yeah.
Last year, and this, and total transparency, was probably the toughest year in terms of my recovery because the stress from work, the Zoe getting sick, all of that sort of stuff starts to stir up thoughts and things that you thought, like, I dealt with all that stuff ages ago. What's that about? But again, having been 11 years down the road, they have the self awareness. They say, well, come here, there's something not right here.
Yeah.
They actually change.
It's something like although it's not addiction, it's dealing with students and young people. Um, through searching and trying to explain what I was thinking, I came across this term as a vicarious trauma, where you're taking on board the people that you're
Yeah.
that you're dealing with. You're taking a bit of their trauma and the things that's going on in their life, and or compassionate fatigues and all. I think it's kind of
Yeah.
it seems to be common.
So the thing that we've started introducing in ARC is regular supervision. So now our team have got regular supervision. So once a month they get access to a trained supervisor, and that's their opportunity. They also get access to us as a team for supervision. We have peer support. We have a peer support meeting now. That's for so most of our team are actually in recovery, so lived experience. So providing them with support on a regular basis. I have supervision now. Purely because you're dealing with trauma, you're working with people who have been impacted by trauma from various different sources, and of course you take that on board. Of course there's transfer there, and I think some people in the world who never have to experience that are very lucky to not have to think about the stuff that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever you're in it all the time, it
Yeah.
can be heavy.
That it's just another thing too is like what you do in terms of your work, mental health, addiction recovery. The work I do is nothing in comparison to that in terms of the gravity, and I struggle with worrying about giving bad advice because working with students, I give so much of myself to them. I build up a relationship and a bond, and although there's great support services within my job, there's a safeguarding team, there's course coordinators and stuff and different staff that you can talk to. But when you spend that time, and maybe it's somewhere of yourself, working with someone to build up a relationship, you're the person they trust.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, they're refusing the help of people that are trained to do it and instead looking for my opinion. And I always worry that I'm going to say something completely wrong, send them down the wrong track.
Mm-hmm.
But the option for me at that point is, do I ignore what's going on, which I can't? Do I try to fob it off again, which I can't? So it is a case where,
there's a funny thing there. Like we need to not think that we fix people, right? Like I don't fix people. I can talk to people from a professional level, from a lived experience level, offer suggestions, guidance, and support, right? But I don't fix people. But I'm confident enough now to be able to say that. Before I felt I had to have all of the answers, right? I don't have all of the answers for everything. For example, people coming in for assessment and like there's a real history of trauma. I'll be very quick to say, look, in relation to my remit here, I can give you all the help and the support that I can in relation to the addiction, the mental health stuff. You see that trauma stuff? I don't have the experience. However, I know someone who can, and I can refer you to that person. And I think sometimes, as long as you're open and transparent about it, it's really good, And addiction. I mean, for years people were given ridiculous advice when it came to addiction. People who were dependent drinkers and told they just stop. For years they were told people were having seizures, end up in hospital. People sometimes think they're doing good, but I think having that insight, they say, you know what, I don't know that much about that, but let me try and find out for you. It's not that you're not helping.
A lot of the times I do it, I find myself having a disclaimer before I speak. Look, I just want you to know I'm not trained in this, and you know, and I suppose that's my way of trying to make sure that
Uh-huh.
I don't know, offer some advice, but again, trying to push them in to speaking to the right people, not push them, but encourage them and say, look, there's someone here that specialises in this.
Yeah.
But I get to the point where I'm finding students saying, no, I don't want to talk to them. I'm bringing this problem to you basically, and at that point, it's a difficult decision because you want to help.
It can be, you know, and I think from my nursing background and the professional side of what I do, it's about transfer of risk.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to take on the risk of everybody that came in, then it would be really difficult. So
Yeah.
I need to be able to understand what I can and can't do, who can do it, and what my duty of care is to the person at the time, and be very clear about it. You know, and sometimes, and go back to that thing when people do come to us, we naturally want to help people, right? And when I say help, fix. That's basically what I mean. I think about if my wife comes in and something will have happened and she'll be maybe emotional, and I'll be like, no, you just have to go and do this and then do that and then do this and then do that. She doesn't want that. She wants me to listen. She wants me to validate that this has upset her. Yeah. Sometimes we just need to give. We have 2 ears and one mouth. We need to give people time to talk. We just need to listen and give them the space and validate their feelings. Do you see the family support group? That's probably the first time that an individual has had feelings of frustration, anger, acknowledged healthy emotions that they're experiencing because of somebody's addiction. But sometimes just validating someone's feelings is important. Also, kicking somebody in the ass sometimes when they need it's really important too, because I had people around me that sometimes addiction, and when you're working with it, 100% compassion all the time. But sometimes, you know, sometimes people, you need to be able to be honest and truthful about someone whenever they're, you know, I definitely had that in my life. But there was one guy in particular, his name was Tim Shields. He ended up, I think my mum asked him to come and help me, and Tim was like, I don't even like him. He ended up being my best man at my wedding eventually. But people like that were not shy to give me a kick in the ass whenever I needed to, you know, in the right context. But it can be hard, and especially working with young people. I think there's more pressures and stressors and things placed upon young people now in society that I think anybody that's in a level of authority almost becomes open to solving people's problems. Mm-hmm. When I think it's about clearly identifying your role and what you can and can't do. And I've had to do that because, I mean, we have people coming through our door every day, and I can't carry the risk of every single person.
No, very true. So you've talked about listening, giving people a kick up the ass when they need it. What other skills do you think? Well, maybe not yourself, but what other skills do you think is really important in terms of, you know, helping people dealing with addiction, mental health?
Do you know what? So people ask, I'm a massive advocate for people with lived experience, okay? Because I sometimes think, I often think people best placed to help other people are people who have experienced similar things. However, I have worked with so many people in the profession that haven't had that are phenomenal at working with people. So I think fundamentally what would make you good with working with people with addiction is compassion, is seeing the person for the person and not the problem. Seeing the person as somebody who's dealing with a set of issues in their life that needs support. And I look at our team. So I look at half of them have got lived experience. They have come through the program that are doing really well. We then have other people that don't, but they all get people coming in our door, and they understand that they get so upset sometimes whenever people don't make it, because they just want people to be okay, but just treating people like people, not as people would, not as I hate, I'm not even going to use words, but not those people, not as those people. No. Just treat them as humans, and I think we need to get better at doing that. And addiction is hard because, as remember I said about the behaviours, but I think about me. I think, was I intrinsically a bad person? No, definitely not. Did I do stupid bad things because of what I was involved in and where I was at? Of course I did. You know, and I think we need to remember that there's somebody in there.
You talked about the team there, and ARC has grown from a one-man band to how many now? 4 or 5.
Oh man, we have a team of 14, which is unreal. We now have 5 full-time members of staff.
Yeah.
Which it used to be me and Max Campbell were the dream team for ages. It was just me and Max doing everything.
Mm-hmm.
To that point where I think the two of us were going to explode, and then we got funding through. So I mean, that's a constant battle. They try, because we work in the community and voluntary sector, so
Yeah.
trying to stay here is always going to be a tough thing. But now to be able to sit we 5 team members, peer support workers, facilitators, volunteers. So we have such a broad range, and that just shows you to the extent of the things that we're doing. So we're not just doing that individual recovery program anymore. We're now doing one-to-one work. We're now doing addiction recovery coaching work, workshop delivery, schools, corporate work. We're doing things in communities. So we're doing so much more, but we can do that now because we have people. We used to rely on goodwill, and goodwill got us really far, but we need a team of people that have a real concerted effort now to help and support. We've had a waiting list on for forever. I mean, since we started, we're the only UK-based organisation that's using physical activity as an intervention for addiction. The only one. And with that comes demand. And that was our problem. We then became a service, that people couldn't access. So our goal now is to use the people that we have to reduce the waiting list that we have. So we're going to run more programs, more people to come through, So we can do that now with a team. But more people, the same space. We need to build 3 more rooms. So we did. So we might have to look for a bigger boat sometime.
It's a big enough boat you have at the minute.
Aye,
It's not a bad sized business.
Yeah.
So if you were to just sit and think about, you've done 4 coming up 5 years, and the next 5 years, then what's your what's your, like, if you were to sit down and write your ideal scenario for ARC in 5 years, what would it be?
Firstly, I want ARC Fitness Derry, right? So it's my baby, right? So outside of Zoe, it's my second baby. I want it to be right, and I want it to run well. I want us to be able to provide the service to people within our community free, get them in. So we try to run our programs free on the ground. But then I want people then to be able to access this from other places. So we have an online learning academy platform that a local organisation, Learning Pool, helped us put together, which could remove the geography. So people could just do the program, access the resources that we have from anywhere. I'd love to start seeing this influence in policy. I'd like to see the health service and the Department of Health and stuff starting to get behind this as an intervention for addiction, and looking at that as, maybe there's an ARC in every region. I think what I'm going to try and do in the next 2 years is have a satellite service in Strabane. I've written that into a funding application. So just to try and access more people in a wider community. And research is really important. And I never thought I would hear myself say those words in the past. Research is really important. But we're now working with the University of Ulster, the medical school. So we are now going to start looking into how we can research the types of programs that we're doing, to then look at bigger pieces of research, because there's something really important in what we're doing. We need to be able to capture the why. I know why, so I see it and I can tell you why, but like, to be able to capture that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So other people can do it. I'm not precious about ARC. I'm not precious about, exercise isn't new.
Yeah.
People in recovery have been marathon running for years. We've just formalised it and made it accessible. So I'm not precious about it, but I would love to see it being utilised more. I want to see more recovery communities. And if we can influence that, if we can be best practice for that, then I think that's a good thing.
Excellent. So the whole point in this discussion is that hopefully somebody can watch it and maybe it'll help somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's watching, listening, struggling with addiction, or a family member. What's the kind of bit of advice you give them?
The first thing is, you're not the only person that's going through this. As difficult and as hard as it is, you're not the only person, but there is help and support out there. We notoriously think that there's nothing out there to help us. There is. We just need to know what they are. If you're struggling with dependency issues, your GP, your first point of call, we are there in the community voluntary sector. Reach out. We try to carry this burden by ourselves, and Gabor Mate, I read a lot of Gabor Mate stuff, and Johan Hari talks about not healing in isolation. So what addiction will do, it'll isolate you. It'll make you pull back from everything that's around you. It's the opposite that you need to do. So you need to connect with people. You need to talk to someone. Get involved in a group. Get support. But don't sit on it. If you're struggling with addiction, it doesn't get better on its own. It'll only get worse. So take the step, reach out. There's a group of people out there that are approachable, supportive, encouraging, and are ready to help you. And hashtag no shame.
Gary, thanks very much for giving up your time to
My
come
pleasure.
and
Thanks for having me.
speak about this. Really informative. I probably have another 50 questions here I could ask you, but I'm very conscious of how long this has ran on. It was really informative. Really enjoyed the chat, and I learnt loads. So I'm hoping that if I had somebody else watching did. So I'm just going to finish the podcast by saying thanks to everybody for watching or listening. Depending on what platform you're on, please subscribe, like, share, follow. Do anything you can to kind of support the podcast and get the message about what we've talked about here on today's podcast out to as many people as possible. Thanks for watching.